All right. Welcome to the RICO 12 speaker meeting. My name is Justin and I'm an addict. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I'm sober one day at a time since June 19th, 2015. And for that, I am beyond grateful. Welcome once again to the RICO 12 speaker meeting. We are an organization whose addictions include alcohol, drugs, lust and sex, food and gambling, just to name a few. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to learn the similarities of addiction and to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom meeting each Friday at noon Central Time for about 25 minutes. And then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of the speaker, in this case, the speakers, for another 20 to 25 minutes. In order to ask questions, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window. Now, if you're hearing this podcast recorded and would like to participate as a live audience member, or if you'd like to even be a guest speaker in a future meeting, please go to www.reco12.com, that's RECO12.com, to learn more and submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations or to submit to become a guest speaker. RICO 12 is an ad-free service, and we appreciate your help in keeping it that way. We do gratefully accept contributions to help cover the costs of the Zoom platform, the podcast platform, web hosting, and administrative costs. To contribute, you can go to reco12.com/support, or you can click the link to PayPal in the chat of the live meeting, or if you're listening on the podcast in the show notes, there is a link to do it from there. When you contribute, please specify the meeting number. This is meeting number 19. Last week's meeting was with Amy, who shared some powerful experience, strength, and hope. If you missed hearing that one, or any other meetings we've done, you can listen to them in podcast form by searching for RICO 12 Speaker Meeting Podcast on virtually any podcast platform that you use. Or you can go to the RICO 12 website and find it under the link podcast. Now, if you find value in RICO 12, please share it with others in your recovery network. Also, please rate and review RICO 12 on the podcast platform of your choice. This will help us get these messages out to more addicts who suffer. Now, let's introduce our guest speakers for today, Patricia and Sid. Now, Patricia and Sid are a mother and son team. They will be speaking today about their recovery journeys, both individually and together. Patricia has actively been working her recovery in Al-Anon and CoDA for about 20 or so years, but not consecutively. As you'll hear from her, she was away for a while as she thought she was cured. She'll tell you more about the cure during the speaker meeting. And Sid's fellowship is CMA, Crystal Meth Anonymous, and his sobriety date is July 3rd of 2017. Both Patricia and Sid are very active in program services and continue to work the steps with their respective sponsors and sponsees. They see this invitation to speak as a continuation of their 12th step and hope that their stories will give others the confidence, courage, and optimism to never give up. Take it away, Patricia and Sid. The floor is yours.
Well, hello there. I am Patricia, and that is my baby boy, Sid. Yes, he's a big boy now, but he is always going to be my baby boy. Sid?
Hi, yep, and I'm Sid. I'm the not so baby boy.
So Sid and I Justin and I met a few months ago on another format that we were both sharing, and he invited me about a month or so ago to do this. It is a leap of faith for both Sid and I, so bear with us. But God is in charge, so I'm okay. So then as I was thinking about it, I thought, well, you know what? It would really be cool to invite my baby boy to do this with me. A couple of years ago, he asked me to please join him in New York in presenting his 2-year recovery chip to him, which was a big deal. And I was honored to be able to do it. It was a room full of people, lots going on, lots of people getting chips. So it was busy times. So we didn't have a lot of time to do our thing, which was probably fortunate in hindsight. But what came to me afterwards was this powerful sensation of, he and I have a really, really good story to tell together as mother and son. So here we are. I invited him and he graciously accepted. So we're launching. As I was preparing and we were preparing together, what I did was I found it was easier for me, since I'm the more senior member of the team, to look at the different chunks of my life, if you will, and to try to put into perspective, how did I get here? And in hindsight, as I've discovered over the years in program, my life has been, my God has been preparing me for this my entire life. I just didn't know it. So here we are. And I strongly feel that my higher power is God. I call my higher power God. I know that there's other names out there, and that's totally cool. But I feel that part of my 12-step work is to spread a message of hope. And what I've discovered in doing this journey with Sid is that it is a we journey from destruction to hope. My destruction, his destruction, all addicts' destructions. But there's hope. There's hope. And that's the message that I want to leave with you today. So just a little bit of background, well, maybe a little bit more than a little bit, but my early years, I was born and raised in Chile. Moved to the States when I was just about 20, so I have a lot of South American cultural influences, if you will, which you'll see that play out in part of my story. But one of the things that I discovered is that broken families make broken families. Unbeknownst to us, we learn things from our parents, good or bad, and then we pass them on to our children, good or bad. And then those things are repeated. And Sid is probably going to talk about some things that I taught him that I shouldn't have taught him, that he mimicked. And here we are. But it's not through any fault of our own as parents, as humans, that we do that. My dad did not have a good father role model. My mother did not have a good mother role model. And consequently, they brought that in. And it just keeps getting passed on and on. One of the things that I have realized in hindsight, or realized through program, is that one of the major issues for me was that I was raised godless. And I didn't realize the impact of that hole in my soul until I was way into life. And I passed, like a good parent, I passed that on to my kids. So then in my teens, my parents at that point were living in a small mining town in Peru. There was no high school. So all of the kids, all of us had to leave to go away to high school. So at just barely 13, I went back to Chile from Peru. And back in those days, this was in the early 60s. Yeah, 60s. Mid 60s. There was no communication. There was no cell phone. There was no technology. There was no internet. The town that my parents lived in Peru had no phone service. So the only way that we could communicate was through ham radio. But that required arranging with a ham radio operator. So what that meant to me was that here I was at 13. I was in boarding school. So I had structure academically, and I was locked in except for the weekends. But other than that, it was a free-for-all. I had no moral or spiritual guidance whatsoever. That's not what they were there for. You know, they were there to make sure that we had our uniforms on right, and that our rooms were clean, and that our academics were in order. And I kept that front up, by the way. In the background, being in a different country away from my parents, I was doing a lot of stuff, messing around with drugs and alcohol. I became sexually active pretty young. We had a great system of telling my grandparents and guardians that we were going one place for the weekend, and the other set of guardians and grandparents that we were going to the other place. And instead, we were taking off and going hitchhiking to the beach or the ski slopes, depending on what season it was. Sneaking out at night, all night. Good stuff. not really. So at 16, that came to a halt because I had to leave Chile due to politics. It was a really, really difficult time for me. I think as I reflected, that was probably one of the most traumatic periods of my time. I was 16. I had to leave my country. I didn't know where I was going. Didn't know what I was going to do. Didn't know where I was going to spend my senior year in high school or what was coming. All I knew was I had to get out of Chile. And there's a lot of stories around my getting out of Chile, but long story short, I wound up ultimately having to skip the border, went into Peru, and then wound up going to Guatemala. Because Guatemala meant no boarding school, and that was the basis of my decision making at that point in time. So here I am at 18 now in Guatemala, pregnant. And back in those days, when you get pregnant in Latin America, you get married. It's the only option. So I did. And unbeknownst to me, the guy that I married, his nickname was Loco. You would think that would have been a clue, but I wasn't picking up clue phones at that point. He was a really, really, really good alcoholic and addict, big time. So now I am at the end of my teenage years, and I am married to an addict and alcoholic, and I have a child. And I was ill prepared. So at 19, I made the executive decision that I was going to try my first geographical fix. So now I'm launching into those habits. If I moved this man to the U.S. and got him away from his family, then surely we could fix things. Didn't work, needless to say. So here I am at 20, married to an addict, in the States, in a new country, no family support around. My parents at that time were still in South or Central America. And now I had 2 children. Because I was pregnant early, I wasn't able to finish my college. So I now was focused on, these were my survival years. I was focused on putting food on the table and trying to manage my life with an alcoholic and an addict. Unbeknownst to me, one of the things that I began to do was search for my higher power husband, which is what was the beginning, if you will, of the manifestation of my issues with relationships. Later, so I got divorced, started this search for higher power husbands, and later in my 20s, I had my baby boy. Now, see, one of the things that's significant here is that I thought that things, well, no, that came later. I was going to say I thought that things were going to be different because he was from a different father. And that was true in some regards, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The threads that are wrapping through this was that I was damaging myself. And when my kids came along, I started damaging them because of my own stuff, not intentionally, but because of who I was becoming. And I was still godless. So there were a lot of holes. So then we moved into the next period, which I call my white knuckling years. And these were the years where my older children were beginning to show, they were going into their teens, early teens, and they were starting to show their genetic predisposition to their father's illness. So those years were nuts. It was actually pure hell. Their teenage years was just pure hell. We had in and out of rehab, inpatient, outpatient, family counseling, arrests, running away from home, barely holding on to school. One of them actually dropped out. And in the middle of all of this was Sid, who was 6 years younger. God knows what was going through his head. I'll let him tell that part of the story. But again, I was on this quest of if I can just find the higher power husband, I can fix this. And my other children were completely out of control. So I'm trying to find where I am. Oh, those crazy white knuckling years, with all of that was going on, my father died. That was my first major loss. He was very young. It was, I didn't expect it. I don't think my mother expected it. So stuff was chaotic. So here I am, still damaging me, still damaging my children. Sid was becoming what I label the lost boy. And I was so godless. Enter Sid.
Hi. And yeah, so for me during this time, I mean, this was elementary school, even a little bit before then. And so this was right around when Just Say No was huge and Dare. And so that contrasted with what was going on at home really influenced my abstinence for quite a long time. I mean, I didn't use or drink or anything till college, actually, which was probably not very typical. In addition to the other things that were going on at home, an impact of that was that there was this punishment book that my mom kind of was advised to put together. And it was this book that was like quite thick, and where you could get punished for any number of things, quite severely. And so I found that quite stifling. In addition to just this instability that was going on at home with my siblings, we were moving around a great deal. And that combined with the fact that there wasn't really a consistent father figure just led to a difficulty that I had in forming and maintaining relationships. So I found it a little bit difficult to get attention or feel love at home. But there were some glimpses of that. So, for example, when my mom and I just lived together, the two of us in Tallahassee, there were kind of fleeting glimpses of that kind of peaceful family life at home.
So yes, the infamous punishment book that actually came from one of our counselors who suggested that was, I guess, the parenting du jour. That was the way to parent back then, and that was how I was going to be able to control and fix these bad children. Because for me, it was all about controlling and fixing. And I had bad children because I had bad husbands. It wasn't about me. Yeah, sorry about that, Sid. But we made our amends, so we're good. So anyway, one of the things that happened for me along that time is that my middle child, my older child was already away in an inpatient facility, and my next child went into rehab. So now there's two down. While my second child was in rehab, we had family week. And to be honest with you, I don't remember if we ever had family week with the older one. It's some of it's just a blur. But what did happen in the second one's family week was that we were sitting in one of our first meetings, and they put up this big poster board of all of these behavioral characteristics. And it was me. Every one of them was me. And here I had just walked into this room, and these people already knew all of my shit. How could they know? The good news was that was the beginning of a turning point for me. So here I am in my mid-30s, and by the grace of God, one of those counselors planted that seed of hope. And what they said to me was that we suggest when you finish this family week that you start looking at Al-Anon. And I did. And it was a lifesaver. I was like a sponge. I needed it so badly, and I just had no clue. I had no clue. So then I was starting to move out of the white knuckling stage, and was moving into what I'm calling the coming out of it stage of my life. I was learning about powerlessness. I was learning about unmanageability. I was introduced to God, and I was humbled. And I started to feel hope. So here I am in my coming out of it stage, starting to feel hopeful, and my mom died. So we have grief on grief again. At that point, there was no higher power husband in the picture. Sid and I were by ourselves, which was really good for us. And I was doing Al-Anon and CoDA pretty hot and heavy. And Sid would go with me to meetings and sit on the side of the room and do his homework. And then we would go and have our after the meeting meetings where we all went out to eat together. And he would get glasses full of every piece of everything on the table, the ketchup, the mustard, the mayo, the drinks, the Pepsis, etc., and mix them all and make things. But the important thing about that time is that he and I were beginning a little recovery journey together. We didn't know it. It was unconscious. And I'm hoping that some seeds were beginning to plant for him too, that there was a way out of this mess. But I wasn't done. I had one more big hurrah. There were some custody issues that were going on, and I got some bad advice from an attorney. Custody issues going on with Sid and his father. And I got some bad advice from an attorney who suggested that if I was married and showed a stable home, I would probably have a better chance in the courts. So I found another higher power husband. And that was probably the worst of the worst and the most damaging for both Sid and I. It was a disaster. And I remember getting to a place where I said, you can have it all, but you can't have my soul. Sid?
So for me, during this time period, it was really the most challenging home life period, especially with this new stepdad. There were just a lot of challenges at home, and I would have a lot of late night conversations with my dad, and his encouragement for me at the time was to stay out of the house as much as possible, just focus on school, focus on my activities. And I think that was really the beginning of where that became a higher power for me, just succeeding and putting everything that I could into that. Also, hi, I'm gay. And during that time, I was starting to realize that I was gay, and I was very much closeted, and I had this shame. And something that I faced, and I think a lot of other gay people face too, is this need to very much excel in other areas of their life to kind of compensate for that shame that they're feeling. So there's that higher power piece. Also, I had decided in high school that I was going to follow this Baptist God higher power. And then when I came out, that didn't really go so well with that church and with a lot of those people. And so I felt very lost. And I didn't really see that as, being my higher power anymore. So following that period, I went to college. I came out, and I found this new sense of freedom from that, stifling sense of, some of the punishments and things like that at home, some of the instability, and just other things that were internal to myself, like with being gay and coming out. And this is where, for me, drugs and alcohol began. And it was really a way of life, not only I'd say within college, but especially within the gay community. There's a lot of drug usage, and it was just very normal. It was what we did to socialize. And also for me, it made just building those relationships and, or at least what I thought was building those relationships just a lot easier. So, okay, back to you, Mom.
So yeah, that time from college, from Sid's college, transitioning into his first job were difficult years, but in a different way than they had been difficult prior to that. So here he was, my beautiful baby boy, the successful one, the non-addict, the non-alcoholic, no genetic predisposition, high achiever, graduated high school with honors, graduated college with honors. He is a chemical engineer. He graduated with no student debt. He was so good at his internship that they gave him, they made him an offer before he was even finished with his degree, and he could walk into this great job with full tenure for the last year of school. What a success. What a success. And then the 8 years of silence. Sid?
So, yes. So during this time, as my mom mentioned, so I graduated from college. I moved to Minneapolis for this really great job. And what I experienced during this time was, just even more sense of freedom. But at the same time, I was starting to feel more and more lost. Thank you, Justin. I was starting to feel more and more lost. So I had this lack of direction. I had things very well kind of planned out before then, and kind of didn't really know where to go from here. In addition, I had these resentments, and I didn't know how to handle them. And one of the impacts of that was that I cut my mom off for years. For years we didn't talk. In terms of drugs, and in particular crystal meth, the usage started out just as kind of a here and there sort of partying, kind of social sort of thing, and changed over the course of years to being fun, social, to basically relying on this for connection, for relationships, to like just using it daily to get through life. Had a huge impact on my relationships, but I didn't really see that. Eventually, it started to have a huge impact on work, which was, again, my higher power, really. And that's where I started to recognize that there was a problem. I moved to New York. I did what was my, geographical. And that's where I actually came into recovery. I started to recognize that there was a problem, and I started to open up to friends and family about the struggle. So I'll continue on a little bit, Mom. I was also, quite stubborn, and I really needed a program at that point to meet me where I was. And so I came into a harm reduction program, which was very helpful for me to at least kind of get one foot in the door in terms of recovery. But I still continued my decline over that period of time. Okay, Mom.
So the 8 years of silence was ended when I got a phone call from Sid's best friend, who told me that he was in a really, really, really bad place. His father was very ill and was probably going to be dying, and Sid needed me. I don't remember actually if it was he who reached out or me who reached out at that point in time, but we did reconnect and started rebuilding. So while he was going through all this transition with his father and the loss of the job in Minneapolis and the move to New York, one day he said to me, but there's more, Mom. And I said, really? How much more can there be, baby boy? And he said, I've been struggling with addiction. And I said, and to what? And he said, crystal meth. And my world came out from under me. Because to me, crystal meth was the bad drug. That was the bad of bads that was going to kill him. So fortunately, I remembered after about 3 days of wailing and controlling and fixing, because what I did was I remembered that I knew how to do this because I had gone through this with my 2 other children. So I started doing the checklist of this is how he's going to get fixed. This is how I can control the situation. I'm the mother. I have control over this. So anyway, that didn't work. I soon remembered, thank God soon remembered Al-Anon. in CoDA and 12-step. And I went back into Al-Anon on my knees. And I have been back since. That has been, I don't know how many years, 10 years maybe, give or take, something like that. And I'm in for life. I'm in for life because I know that I was never cured because it's my stuff. It's not about them. And until I get straight in my head about my shit, I'm not ever going to be cured.
And so for me, at this point, I had this continued sort of decline until finally, I just really had the hugest impact on my work, higher power. I lost this really great job, and for me, that was the thing that I needed to really just to really show me that I needed to make a huge change. And so that's where I came into program. For me, my program is CMA, Crystal Meth Anonymous. And because I'd hit my bottom, I admitted that I was powerless, that I had this unmanageability in my life. At that point, I took it upon myself to do a 90 and 90, which, if you don't know, is 90 meetings in 90 days. I got a sponsor. I started working the steps. For me, steps 6 and 7 have been the greatest impact because it's really about recognizing the way that you automatically want to react in a situation, taking a pause, and hopefully sometimes reacting in a different way. Sometimes maybe I don't do that, but I at least take the pause and think about it first. And, so I've been doing really quite well. I'm building, I think, what is a life of greater authenticity, greater self-love, rebuilding my relationships with both friends and family. And, I'm what I hope to be is more selfless. I'm working with some sponsees, able to care more for others, pass on the message to them, and really just see the impact of my recovery.
So we are on this journey together, which has just been phenomenal. It's just been phenomenal. I don't know that my recovery would be as complete as it is and has been if I hadn't been able to share this journey with Sid. And I think that it's brought us closer in ways that probably nothing else could have. One of the things that I want to wrap up with is that I've come to understand two things. One is that my life without God was far worse than my life with God. And that's pretty core for me now. The other thing is that everything in this life of value and of importance that I've learned from this disease of addiction. And for that, I'm grateful. And awesome. I love you, baby boy.
Thank you so much, Patricia and Sid. That's awesome. And go ahead and share back your love there, Sid.
I love you too, Dan.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. All right. I so appreciate your stories. What awesome, amazing stories. I mean, just Patricia, your growing up, I think, is a novel in and of itself, probably. And then Sid, your journey over the last, decade to 20 years is just I'm sure one that could also fill a novel. I'm gonna jump right over into the Q&A section here. So it's now time for our guest speakers to answer your questions. If you have questions, please make sure you type them in the Q&A section down below. I've got a few here that we'll start off with, and we'll go from there. So first of all, I want to start with Sid. Sid, that punishment book, man, I really can relate to that. Although I never saw a book in my home, I can get that. But tell me, how did that punishment book impact your image of your higher power moving forward?
That's a good question. I don't know that I can necessarily relate it to a notion of higher power, because at that point, I don't really know that I had any notion of what a higher power was. And I think really ultimately, for me, I just found it to be stifling in a way that I couldn't really express myself. I couldn't really say the things I wanted to say, act in ways that I wanted to act in my experience. And that impacted things later on because it was like a pendulum swinging. And so basically it went from a place of bottle everything up, don't show who you are, to, okay, I'm going to completely go the other way and do whatever the hell I want. And in that sense, I was sort of higher powerless as well, too. Just sort of, I don't know, maybe it was meant to sort of give me some direction, but it worked completely the other way.
I appreciate that. And I can see though how that would mold how I would think of my higher power. Hey, if I do this, I'm going to get that punishment, and God's going to hold me to that. Now, what does Sid, following up on that, what does your current higher power, what does that look like to you right now?
Really good question. That is something that I am honestly defining for myself again, what it looks like right now. I would say, I definitely recognize that there is a higher power, that I can't do this by myself, and so maybe in some senses, a higher power for me could just be my support network, right? I, for a period of time, had recognized that program for me, CMA, was a higher power. And then last year, I had some challenges with that program, and that really kind of shook my notion of, all right, is this really the higher power? So I did manage to move past that. I didn't use, but I don't know that I would consider that necessarily what my higher power is right now. So it's interesting to ask that question, because I'm also exploring right now what step 11 is going to look like for me. So what does prayer and meditation look like in my life? And so I'm asking around to other fellows that have some time and experience as to what that looks like for them. So I'm exploring really right now.
Very good, and I wish you the best of I don't want to use the word luck, but that's all I can think of in that. I hope that you find comfort and a source where you can feel that guidance and meditation that comes through that. Patricia, a couple questions for you. And these are focusing a lot on higher power, and maybe that's because where I come from, but this is really good. You talked about seeking higher power husbands. Now, as you compare the higher power husbands that you sought to higher power God, what was the immediate difference that you found in that search and in that discovery?
The immediate difference, I think, was the realization that my God, my real higher power, is not in physical form on this earth, and that those unkind humans that I was choosing to fix what was wrong, it just wasn't the way. It just wasn't the way. There is no way that those men could be a higher power.
Thank you for that. And a follow up, and this doesn't really have to do with the higher power, and we'll get off of that there. But you talked about how you really wanted to control the bad people in your life. When and how did that realization that your powerlessness over controlling them, and also that you played a part in what was going on, how did that come to pass, and then how did you deal with that, recognizing your own part in these situations?
This notion of controlling and fixing for those of us that are codependents or Al-Anons is really at the root of our malady, if you will. It's a little bit different gig in that our addiction, my addiction, is you and you and you and you. It's a relational thing as opposed to a substance thing. So it takes on a different. It's a horse of a different color in that it's less elusive. I mean, it's more elusive. I can't stop having relationships in order to consider myself cured or fixed. But what I can do is to control my controlling behavior. And that's out of the desperation of trying to make it better. One of the conversations that Sid and I had while we were doing our prep work was, I made a comment that I had heard somewhere recently that this notion of addiction is a love disorder. And we had a little bit of conversation about that, because I think, and correct me, Sid, if I'm misquoting you, but I think that his interpretation of that was because my addiction is this relationship thing and the higher power husbands and so on and so forth, that that was the kind of love disorder that I was referring to. And I was in part, but that's not the complete picture. The complete picture is that it's a love disorder starting with love of self. And from there, the disease can manifest itself outwardly in a number of ways. Did I answer your question, or did I go off on a path?
I think you shared exactly what you needed to share. It was good.
I actually want to mention one thing on the control piece too, because that's definitely something that it could be one of my defects. And I would say that I think that over time I've gotten a bit better at trying not to control others, or letting go of that control, or sort of stepping back a little bit. But when it comes to myself, that's actually really something that I'm trying to sort of rebalance right now. And the reason why I say that is, I'm thinking from honestly from an emotional standpoint. So when I was using, I just didn't have any control over my emotions, right? I was really at the whim of them. And to some extent, I would say that I probably used to be able to access those emotions, right? And so I think I had this overbearing feeling that I needed to control because they were so out of whack. And now that I haven't been using, I think that there's still not that equilibrium there, right? Because I'm so used to controlling how I feel, that I think that overbearing sense of control is kind of impeding my ability to show them sometimes, to be vulnerable. And so that's something that I'm actively working on.
Very cool. Thank you, Sid and Patricia. Got a comment here, and I'll add a question on the end of it. But the comment comes in from Sal, and he says, both of my parents were dead by the time I realized that I had a serious addiction. I miss the strength that my parents would have been to me in my recovery. I am blessed to have a wife that is standing beside me the way that you, Patricia, are standing beside Sid. So my question is to both of you, Sid and Patricia, how is having a loved one, a member of the family, working together in recovery, how has that benefited both of you?
I didn't have either of my parents by the time I started my recovery. So Sal, I feel what you're talking about. I remember actually early in my recovery, I was on a trip with my mother, and I was reading my Al-Anon book, my One Day at a Time. And she asked me what I was reading, and man, I got excited. It's like, oh, let me tell you. And I started telling her, and we're in a hotel, and I'm talking. And I look over, and she's sound asleep. And it pissed me off. It's like, here I am telling you about one of the most significant events of my life, and you fell asleep. So, Sal, I guess I would say the support comes from different places, and we just don't know where it's coming from. For me, it's been paramount, sharing this journey with Sid. It's strengthened my recovery, and it has really, really helped me to see the family unit differently. And where I used to lump everybody into the same bucket, I now am able to see each one as their own person and establish a relationship based on where we both are. Where he is, where I am with my other children. They're not all in the same bucket anymore.
Yeah, and for me, it has I would say my relationship with my mom has just blossomed. It's come to a really beautiful place. I did my 9 step amends with her last year around Christmas time, and it's been great to have her support throughout this time, and to continue to grow together. And unfortunately, I don't have that with my dad. I won't have that with my dad. He passed several years ago, and it's a regret that I have. That I was still stuck in my addiction as he was passing. I was there as much as I could, but I really wasn't that present during that period of time. And he's on my amends list. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'll determine that later. So I'm really fortunate to have what I have with my mom.
Beautiful. Thank you both for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And I think that having that family support really does help in the recovery of both sides, the healing and the recovery. Awesome. Oh, we do have a question that came in from Leanne. Leanne, this is for Patricia. She says, when Sid was in the throes of addiction, how much did you lean in to help and also let go? How did you balance the codependency disease to fix and letting God?
That's a slippery slope. It's a very slippery slope, and it is through trial and error. I remember the early years after Sid and I reconnected, when he was still very actively using. I remember trying to juggle my momness and my desire to help with bailing him out of what he had created for himself. And some of the ways that I juggled that was he didn't have a bed. And instead of giving him money, I bought him a bed. Because that way I at least felt like I had some control over where that money was going, and it wasn't going up his nose or wherever it was that stuff was going. So it was a question of just finding my way and setting boundaries. I remember having a conversation one time about, I can't control what you do outside of my house, but don't bring it into my house. And we had a really, really bad Christmas one year because he brought it into my house. But all of that is learning. All of that is learning how to navigate. It was an unpleasant thing to go through, but I think that I grew from it. I believe that Sid grew from it. To some degree, it's making it up as I go along. Is this enabling or is this helping? And keeping my mouth shut. If he's not asking for advice, I don't give it. If he's not asking for money, I don't give it. If he's not working his program the way that I might think he should be working his program, or if he's not defining his higher power the way that I think he should be defining his power, that's his business. That's his, and I have no business being in there. But it's day by day. The mom stuff is really hard to push to one side. Where as parents, we've got this conditioning that says, well, it's your job, you're supposed to. And that's really not true. At some point, you're really not, I'm not the mom anymore. Sid's 40 years old. He doesn't need a mom at this stage to be that kind of mom in terms of telling him what to do and how to do it and all that kind of stuff, and bailing him out of the stuff that he might create for himself. That's not my job. My job today with him is to have a fun adult to adult relationship. It changes.
One thing I want to say is, so for the record, that so for that Christmas visit, I guess I on a technicality, I brought it into the house, meaning that it was in me, right? But I did not bring the drug into the house, right? So but in all seriousness, yes. I mean, I honestly, I was still high, and it made for a very difficult holiday. And honestly, that's just an example of the powerlessness and unmanageability, right? Because I knew I was going to my family's for the holiday, but I was doing things that probably would not have led to a good experience, like the night before and even before I left. I was powerless, and it led to just a very unmanageable experience.
Very good. Thank you both for those shares. I'd like to turn a minute or two over to each of you to give us some final words of wisdom, maybe from your own experience, strength, and hope in this, to maybe encourage others who are looking for the solution, encourage others who are looking for some hope, a light of hope. So let's start with you, Sid, and then Patricia, if you'll close us up on that.
So I would say, from my standpoint, that if you're struggling with addiction, to be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself, be gentle. This isn't something that you can do alone. Ask for help. Be willing to ask for help. Just so along the lines of being gentle to yourself, find something that works for you. Find a program that works for you. If you are having some difficulties, if you don't like what you're seeing with one thing, if it's 12-step, or if it's harm reduction, or if it's even forms of like meditation, just find something that works for you.
Thanks, Sid. Patricia?
I remember in one of my early return Al-Anon meetings, when I was in my desperation. It was during the 8 years of silence, and my relationship with my other children was in the toilet as well. And I remember there was a woman who was 90 years old in my meeting, and she had just reestablished a relationship with her granddaughter. And it came because of some events that happened because of both of their recovery. And she came up to me at the end of the meeting, got about 2 inches pre-corona, 2 inches from my face. And she said, she says, don't you ever, ever, ever give up. There's always hope. It struck me because she was so convicted, but I dismissed it because I didn't think at that time that there was ever hope that I was going to be reconnected with Sid, and certainly not on this level. I didn't think that I was ever going to be reconnected with my oldest daughter, because that relationship was just a disaster for a long, 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 long time. And now we talk and we have fun. The other one, jury's still out. But we all suffer from this disease of addiction, regardless of what the substance is. And if we recognize that and we come at ourselves and our loved ones with compassion, we can break the chain. I really believe that. My hope is that for future generations, that they won't have to go to the school of hard knocks like we have, because we have a message now that we can share.
Awesome. I really appreciate that, Patricia and Sid. Addiction is a family affair, but recovery is also a family affair if we make it so. All right, that was a great RICO 12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If you have any other questions, please go to rico12.com/forum and join in our community and ask those questions and answer others' questions that may come up there. I invite the audience to come back next week. If you have not yet gone to rico12.com and submitted your email address to get on the invitation list that goes out every Wednesday, please do so. That way you can join us live each Friday at noon Central Time. I have been asked to choose a recovery prayer from a list, and I've chosen the Thomas Merton prayer. So I'm going to close this out with that and send us into our day with that one. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself, and the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does, in fact, please you, and I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. Amen. Thank you again, Patricia and Sid. This was such a good one. Everybody, keep coming back. It works when I work it, so work it. You are worth it. Have a great week.
Thank you, Justin.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine.